Cool. How many of, I think we are still waiting for a few people, so we're just going to have some light Q&A to start this off. All right.
You're going to ask them.
How many, yeah, I'm going to ask them what you told me to ask them. So, how many of you have used MapQuest? Anybody remember MapQuest? Oh, cool. No one over here? Like, really? Oh, cool. All right. Yeah, I was judging you, man. All right. So MapQuest, I think, late 90s, is that when you like sort of got into it? The habit of like putting stuff on maps that are on computers. Google Earth? Basically all of us, I guess. Anyone's been to Paris on Google Earth? Oh, okay. All right. Fetish, yeah. Nerdy fetish. But Google Earth came out in 2007. I think before MapQuest, we had something like MapBooks. Anyone used MapBooks? Yeah? All right. Oh, geez. Very cool, very cool. So I think in the last 20, 30, 40 years, as the industry has evolved, the technology has evolved with it, especially the mapping technology has evolved with it. And we're going to put forth this vision of how, when everything comes together into a central interface, the maps that your sales team has, the maps that your accounts team has, the maps that your operations team has, bring that all together into a single place, what that does for your business. And this is not going to be a talk about AI or like, all those buzzwords that are flying around lately. We're going to talk about something very basic and fundamental. Last year, there was this thing I said to Daniel that we talk a lot about production softwares, we talk about takeoff softwares, estimating softwares. We don't really talk about a mapping software, and which is remarkable because our entire business runs in a spatial environment. We are trying to maintain assets in a property, and then we don't have that visually represented very well inside the systems that we use on a regular basis, and that limits how much we can extract from that data. And so with that in mind, the way we're going to go across this talk is establish what's that vision, and then show you something that's available today, where it's going from that point in the next few years. All right. I should have introduced you guys, right? Yeah, all right, cool. We'll get into that now. So you all know Ben. Something that you may not know is his wife is a GIS major. Back when he had his own company, he built a software called Tapigo. That was like 9 years ago, right? And so it helped the irrigation managers communicate issues with the property managers, with the customers on the map. It was ahead of its time, and yeah, I think we can get into why it could have been successful or why it can be successful today. Daniel runs Greenscape out of North Carolina. It's a $15 to $20 million enterprise. Yeah, all right, cool. And probably the most advanced in terms of accepting new technologies. Back in August 2020, when we had the first system of autonomous takeoffs come out, right? You heard Attentive, you have heard all these guys over here. They talk about AI and takeoffs. The first thing that came out was in August 2020, and he was the first guy using it back then. So like literally the pioneer who sort of like brought us all into that space. Mick runs a weird company. It's got like 25-year-olds doing landscaping. I don't know how he does it, but he's like, oh yeah, when they come into the company and we do their onboarding, we do karaoke nights. And then everybody's friends after that. And so that's Mick. He's out of Omaha, Nebraska. And with that, let's get into the discussion. All right. First question for you guys. What was the biggest innovation in mapping technology that you saw over your career? And then you can also sort of say where things were before to sort of highlight why that piece is like the biggest innovation you have seen in the business.
For me, like a lot of the guys that probably started out a long time ago, I had a map book in my truck, and I'd flip through to try to find where an address was and how to get there. And I remember the first time we were able to do something on MapQuest and print it out, and I would print it out and have it in the center console of my truck and get so excited because turn-by-turn directions were something I could give to the crews and that I could have, and I would know how to get somewhere quickly. And then, fast forward that to after I got out of, started my own business and were able to first use a measuring tool within Google, on Google Maps. I mean, it kind of changed the game for us, and it made a lot of my designers pretty lazy because they could sit inside of an office and then just measure stuff and not have to go and do a lot of site measurements. So and seeing all that over the current times, I mean, it's been some major, huge strides that we've been able to benefit from and that we're still benefiting from right now.
Sorry, Daniel. Ben, you don't want to get into the story with Ivan? Like the first time you visited a site?
Yeah, so I was telling him this earlier. So I don't think Ivan's here, is he? Ivan, if y'all know him from Cleanscapes. He was my first boss out of college. And so when I got out, he took me to a site, and we sat in the middle of the first day. And I was nervous, even though I'd been landscaping since I was 13. And he sat me in a cul-de-sac of a huge retail center and said, hey, how many hours does it take to mow this site? And I'm just like, I don't know. And he's like, just add it up in your head, just figure it out. And so I'm going through, and I'm adding that 5, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. And I came up like 6.5 hours. He's like, no, you're wrong, it's 8. And so I was just like, wow, this guy is the smartest man on the face of the earth. But also, it showed there was some discrepancy on even what he and I thought, and I had been in the business for a little bit, and he'd been in for a long time, on how we came up with measurements, and it was pretty chaotic, right? Before we even got out and didn't wheel off anything, we didn't measure anything. This is back in the late 90s. We were just going out there and assigning time to certain areas based visually on when we drove through the property. Now, that's not a perfect system, right? And that's not a way for us to all have a consistent way that we bid projects. But that was my first intro to how do we do takeoffs on a site. And luckily, it's gotten better since then.
Thank God.
A little bit.
Yeah, I would say the measurement automation has been the biggest changes. My first experience in the industry was in commercial maintenance sales, and I remember when I took the position, like day one, they took me out to teach me how to measure. It wasn't so much this, but it was with a wheel, and I remember we had to measure this, multi-acre property with a wheel.
How hot was it? Like, was it like summer?
Yeah, it was probably July in North Carolina. So
Yeah, sweaty.
yeah, it was a little warm. But I remember when I was done with that, I was thinking, I was like, this is literally how we make money. Like, is measuring properties with a wheel, walking around and writing on a note board. So that process has changed dramatically, in that 20-year period of time. So, and automation is working very well now.
For me, it would be, it's somewhere between, I remember MapQuest, and I remember ours is an older family business, and the fight that was MapQuest, right? Like the internet was pretending like it could tell people how to get somewhere fast. And like the old order of landscapers back then didn't want to have it, right? So I remember that, and that was a really big deal for us, and it was a really big change, and it did make us like that much more efficient. And it's funny how recent that's been, given how big of a development that really was. Like I remember the big map board on the wall that had all the zip codes. But equivalently for us, more recently, and we've started using kind of a Utkarsh's mapping platform in the last 6 months. But the ability to automatically take off sites in volume, I think for us has changed. It's changed that much, both how our salespeople act, but also what we select for in salespeople, because that whole element of accuracy has just changed. And now we have people thinking way more about means of presentation and kind of how they want to talk to customers. And it's been really cool to watch in our business.
Very cool. I think one of the big changes that happened was with the coming of cloud and fast internet in 2010, when you can actually have maps on cloud. And so with a central piece of map, different people can sort of log into the same interface and see what's going on. I mean, yeah, automation is great and sort of like a recent thing, but like going back 8, 9 years, just having all of that digitally available would have been a big step too. Like, do you guys remember that transition happening like 10 years ago?
Yeah, honestly, for us, I think the transition's been even more recent because it kind of missed us, right? Like, we were using Google. We were using Google Maps the same way a year ago. We were using it about 10 years ago, save what Ben described. Like, we would occasionally measure something small on a property, but then probably go check it. we didn't have a really good means of saving that. So we used to take like a lot of screen grabs of maps and save them in PowerPoints and then put those onto iPads for people in the field and other ad hoc things to try to get maps into people's hands. But it's really been for us in the last 6 months to a year that we understand, not only understand, but have access to a feature-rich mapping platform where maps have just, from sales up into account management, including field operations, we're using the same map to talk about things, and that's been, if that gets to your question about the cloud, I think being able to save that quickly in one place has definitely made that possible for us.
Makes sense. To your point on the life cycle of a property, if I can use that word, like you start from sales, goes over from the sales guy to the account manager, there's a handover happening, and then the ops guys take over, the crew goes onto the site every week or so. And at every point of that process, people are putting eyes on site. People are putting data into place in their own fashion. So if the account manager is like walking the site, he would take notes in the notebook he has. Maybe there's a printable version of the takeoff piece that's being distributed in the team, and they're doing markups on top of it. Talk to me about the value of actually bringing all of that into one place.
Yeah, so I'll start kind of back, like you brought up with the irrigation app that I developed way before its time. I thought that it was really beneficial. I'm not an irrigator, I'm a landscaper, and irrigation
It's
is
okay,
like
Ben, it's okay.
It's a bane of my
It's all right.
existence a lot of times, to be honest with you. But my irrigator that was there, we had a very manual process like everybody else, where it was like, go out to the property and say, oh, it's clock 2, zone 3's got a problem, and write it on a piece of paper and have it spray all the stuff. It was a horrible manual process that took forever, that was very rarely accurate, that had scribble on stuff, and we were trying to make it to where you could go out with your phone and make an app to where you could have an as-built on the site that you could do with your finger, and then you could go and drop all the assets. So when people came, they would see a live dynamic map that they could utilize, and regardless of what your position was in the company, we're all sharing the same thing. And so it worked really well within the company. The industry wasn't quite ready for it at the time, but it worked really well within the company on us being able to share information about irrigation as built. When I got up to a site, I could see where I was, what zone I was standing in, what clock serviced it. And that was my first intro with the GIS stuff and with software development, and saying, wow, it would be really cool if we didn't have to just rely on all these paper processes and instead had a living dynamic map that we could all utilize and look at the same thing and say the same thing to the client, convey the same thing in our inspections. So when UCARS kind of was showing me their product roadmap for SiteRecon, it was like, holy crap, that's like everything I was trying to do on steroids, because it kind of starts with the takeoff, it starts with the automation of, hey, here's what a property extent in the map looks like for our business, and then you layer on all these other abilities, whether it's irrigation, whether it's a tree topo, whether it's enhancements, whether it's site inspections, to be able to have all that live dynamically on top of a singular map that we can all share, it's a no-brainer to me. Like I know that I'm a recovering technologist, but it's like I really enjoy the idea that we can have something like this available to our industry. And so we're testing it with them right now. We're looking at it, but imagine the benefit of all of us having the same information we're looking at when we walk onto a site, and it's all shared, and you can put pictures, it's easy to use, it's an app on your phone, you can drop stuff into it. I think a living dynamic map for our industry is going to be a game changer for a lot of people.
I think to extend on that, like, as it's almost frustrating how obvious it is now, but notes being geolocated, like obviously and intuitively geolocated on a map, is that big of a deal for us, right? It's not like they sit next to the map. Like that's not clear enough for a lot of the people that I work with. It's physically, this is where that hot spot is, right? This is where that drain is. And that's been really helpful for us. And include a photo of it, right?
Sorry, so Mick just made a point about the note being located on the map, so I want to give you an intuition of what he's talking about. So you take these snaps, you write down your text, and yeah, you create the note, and it's on the map, you know where it is, you see where you are standing with respect to that note. You can walk down to it, so all the photos being shared on SMS or email, someone needs to explain to the crew on site where that thing is. Especially when the crews change or the account managers change. And with that information living like that, it's like the company has it. It's not in the account manager's head.
Yeah.
Right? That's one of the points you've been.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, over my 20-year career, we've developed a lot of institutional knowledge, right? We've had a lot of great people that have done great work, and it's all here, right? And so they have the pictures and maps and the data in their head, right? So when they go to a site, they know where everything is, they know what happened when, and what's going to happen next, and it's all in their head. And then if they walk out the door, that's just kind of gone, right? And so this is one of the first, I think, opportunities I've seen to really, we've tried the shared drive and putting, okay, we're going to put all the documents for this in one place and stuff, but it just isn't very visual, and it doesn't look like people's heads, right? And so I think when you do it like Mick talked about, when you are able to visualize the data, not next to the map, but on the map, and then layer that with everything, like Ben said, of all the things you'd want to see, I think this is a game changer for our businesses, because we can now go from institutional knowledge to like, a real tool that we can help make multiple people successful with.
To your point, Daniel, the information entered into a production scheduling software, it's very texty. There's a lot of text in it. The map that you have in there is basically a snapshot. Having the information on the map, I think the way I understand it is it intuitively helps you feel the operation without actually being on site.
Yeah, I think a good example and a relatively extreme one, and we're a much smaller company than either of these two guys, but we maintain a couple retail centers, both of which have, call it 50 to 75 containers, floriculture containers.
Planters?
Planters, yeah. And they're super important to these clients, relatively small part of it to us. And we mess it up at least twice a year at some level. And what this has given, it has given us the ability to a crew, show them exactly where all 50 of the containers are. When they get to a container, see an actual photo of that container, right, in elevation, and then also attached to that a drawing of specifically what we need to go into that specific container. So for us, for a really long time, that was really manual. There was one lady who was the container lady, and if she went on the property, everything was awesome, and if she didn't, it was a disaster, right? And sometimes she would do we'd do some share file thing that would break, but putting it actually physically on the map, it was amazing how quickly, one, it exposed cases where we just weren't doing our job, but two, really helped us improve those.
Bless the container lady.
Yeah.
Bless her. Yeah.
Her name's Anne.
Yeah, don't discount the container lady.
She's not huge into the map thing.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about that. Some people just take it on very easily. For others, it's like, oh, I don't want to do it. How do you handle stuff like that?
Yeah, I think one, that's part of the problem I had when I was developing my irrigation app. It made sense to me, but if it doesn't make sense to the user in the field, and if it isn't easy for them to use, then it's not going to be successful. And so I think one of the important things is making it as easy as humanly possible for the person in the field to open it quickly, take pictures and utilize it, or locate things on a map. I think this is doing a good job of that, and I think there's just some people that aren't going to accept it. And you just have to be okay with that. I mean, some people are not going to be okay with pulling out an iPad instead of a piece of paper and trying to find something, and we have crews like that, and those people, we actually take the same information that's on the phone and print it out and we hand it to them, and then all of a sudden it's okay. Yeah. Right? But it still doesn't change the way that we use the technology. Instead, it changes the way that we deliver the communication for the people in the field. So we match it to the person who's going to do the work, and if they need it printed out and they need to be tactile and they need to feel it, that's okay. But it doesn't change the benefit, I think, of something that we've got like this.
How much power do leaders have in organizations to push it top down? It's like a question for you, Daniel. And you can answer the question before that too. Yeah.
I get both?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm going to take the second one. How much power do we have? We have all the power, right? It's our company. Yeah. We can do whatever we want. That doesn't work very often. So
that's sad.
But I do think it is very important from technology, software is adopted and really into your culture, right? Does your culture adopt this? Does it make is this something that fits? Or if they say, no, it's not, it's really hard to have, to force a culture to adopt it. So that's that piece, but then also, I mean, as a leader, you know, you've got to be clear that like, hey, we are implementing this software. This is the why on it. This is how it's going to work, and stay committed to that plan. And because as soon as you give up, you know, like as soon as you stop mentioning it, stop going, hey, where are we at with that? That's when, you know, everyone's like, he's no longer paying attention, so we're not doing that anymore.
Pushing me.
He's like, dudes sitting next to each other that close, they're not comfortable, man. It's just a dude thing.
To extend on that, I think our company, we've been landscaping for about 60 years, and I think that we forgot how to do our job. We implemented SiteRecon maybe like a year ago, and I think that we completely forgot how to do our jobs without it about 6 months ago, which is frustrating in a different way. But what was interesting about the adoption process is that I tried first to convince like Ann, who we all know now, and a few other like long-term employees to use it, and I got nowhere. There's a guy who started with us, new account manager. His name is John. John found this and very quickly started to build momentum, and he was just out executing a lot of the people who've been there longer than he was. And he was a nice guy about it. He was happy to show people how to use it. And then it went really fast, because that same fear of irrelevance that was, I think, motivating pushing it away, it turned into a different thing where then they had to try to catch up.
Was it like a competing thing between different people? Like John's using it, I'm not using it sort of thing?
So I think the organization wanted that to be true at first, like the fear reflex wanted to make it that.
Yeah.
But I think that the credit where credit's due, the way John used it and implemented it, and as generous as he was with it, it didn't become that, and it caught on very quickly. I just had a phone call this morning, because I knew we were gonna have this talk with a branch manager, and he was pretty slow to it, and he was all excited. We got a phone call from a property manager we've been trying to sell for a long time. They're new to our market. They called us. They wanted us to put numbers to 12 snow sites. We're just starting to bid a lot of our snow. He was able to turn 12 new properties around in about 72 hours. He was thrilled. I'm thrilled that he isn't mad at this. That's great. So yeah, it's been really cool.
I think that's a good point. I think when we talk about, if we have to use the word change with software technology, that's always like kind of really scares me, because people are very resistant to change.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do you get people to change? But it's much easier to get people to evolve, right? So I'm sure your branch manager had a process to get those 12 sites, and it took way more than 72 hours in the past, right? And you gave him a tool, an avenue to decrease that. And so it was a no-brainer at that point. And so he's seen an evolution to that process that's improvement. And I think that works over and over again, versus change is much harder.
Yeah, and not to stay on this one too long, but also whenever we have to do bids fast, like you're going to get a very raw, you're going to send you an invoice that we're going to call a proposal, right? And I just saw what they're sending out, because he was so excited he sent it to me. But it's like a really nice, thoughtful presentation. We're talking about the property manager. We're talking about why we're excited about them being in our market, right? We're actually showing the sites. There's some annotated maps with the polygons drawn. And all of that, too, just to your point about it used to take Bob a lot longer. Now that it goes so much faster, now he's actually being the leader he needs to be and leading a group of people to put together a presentation that is actually compelling.
Right.
In 72 hours.
How much does the customer appreciate getting something like that? I mean, there's a prospect stage of that customer, right? When he's like going through the sales process, and then he's your customer, you're managing the account. As the data keeps getting built up, the property managers currently don't have great maps of their exteriors, right? They're like, you would expect them to, because it's like, it's their property, but they don't. Right. So, like, yeah, do you think it makes a difference? Like, how do they appreciate it at the sales point and then later at the renewal point?
I think it's huge. I've got a good story. I have a client that was, let's say, not my favorite person in the world for about a decade.
Client was the favorite person?
He was not.
He was not.
He was a miserable person. And so we had this need for each other. I knew the developer. He couldn't fire me. He was a big, old-time dude at the management company. They weren't going to fire him, so we had to tolerate each other in whatever way we can. When we first started using stuff like this and other ways to communicate with him, I can tell you it took me about 8 years of us not liking each other. One day I was sitting in his office, and I pulled up one of these maps that we had done. It was not as cool as what Utkarsh has here at the time. It was through Evernote. But we layered and put a picture on and annotated and layered some stuff. And we had started doing site inspections that way, probably 6 months prior. I hadn't shared it with the client yet because we were still kind of testing it out. And we were sitting in a room. He had recalled a conversation we had on a street side where we talked about this tree, and he couldn't remember what we discussed about it. And I pulled up that map and I showed it to him, and it had all those annotations on it from my property inspection when I was personally there doing the property inspection. And he looked at me like with this love in his eyes. I could just see he was just like, holy crap, that was impressive. Like that's something that I could utilize as a property manager to share with the HOA and other people to say, crap, we've got this great resource of information that I wasn't going to find through email, right? That he was going to go and try to search through. He wasn't going to find either. He wasn't great at email. And so I think for me, that changed our relationship dramatically. Now, again, he couldn't fire me. I couldn't fire him. But every time I walked into that property afterwards, every time I walked back into his office, I felt like I wasn't hated as much, and that was a big deal for me. And then he started using me as a resource for information. So if he couldn't find something, I had to start going there and doing a lot of inspections manually, personally myself, because he'd start asking me for, hey, you remember in February what that looked like, and do you have a picture of it, and can you send it to me? And I didn't always have the answer, but the times that I did, I felt like I made him look like a hero. So it's a big part of the communication portal. It was easy for me to do. So it made life easy for me, and it was an easy way to convey to him what he needed for the board meeting or whatever else he was going into at the time. So I think it's a huge way for our industry to look more professional than most, and for us to set ourselves apart from our competition. I think it makes us look better.
There was a story that I didn't tell you about. You were bidding on the University of Omaha job a few months back.
Yep.
That guy called me, the property manager. He called me, it was 3 in the night, I was in India. And he calls me and he's like, hey, we work with this large landscaping company called Mulholland's. By the way, he thinks you are large. Good job. And so he's like, oh yeah, you did the maps for them, I want it. And so we then helped him out with it.
You gave him our maps at 3 a.m. from India? Just kidding.
Yeah.
Customer service.
Yeah. Customer service, yeah.
No, to talk about a university and just to your point of then you become the resource. We had another university in town recently kind of accidentally outsource. Their horticulture team all quit kind of together because the university hasn't, it's not able to respond as quickly to the wage increases that we're seeing in our market as some of the private contractors. And so they called us, and it was the director of facilities who reported to whatever it was, the executive vice president. And the director essentially said, she left, the lady who managed the actual grounds, she left. This is a huge deal for us. We don't know what to do. We need help. I know you guys have been around here. So we went through the process, built these maps out, spent some time on the property, located it. And what quickly started to happen is that we started to kind of prep our contact to talk to his boss about the property. And once you get to that place, it gets really sticky. Because not only are we doing the work for him, we're doing the work for him in a way that he doesn't fully understand, but trusts us enough to articulate to him and to provide him physical maps that actually can show what we're talking about where in a uniform and consistent way.
Very cool. So a question, we are still on the customer point before we close it. The retention, the chances of retention would obviously be higher. So they use you as a resource. You got data for their properties like no one else does.
Well, unless they call you, evidently, but.
Yeah, no, so I want to clarify that. There are 2 types of data in the system, and this is very personal to us. There are takeoffs that we create. The data that we create, we would have it. If you create takeoffs for yourself in our system by using the tools and annotating it, by all means, it's all yours. You want us to export it, give it to you. We'll give you the actual files. Take it wherever you want it. We'll build the integration bridges. You are taking photographs on site, taking notes. All yours. The system is still open. You can take it away anytime you want. But when we put the data into the system, we own it. You put your time. You put the data into the system. You own it.
Yeah, and I'm just being glib. I mean, it's exciting, right? That we somehow communicated. This university that he's talking about, we've been trying to sell forever. So the idea that they heard us and noticed us enough to make a second phone call to a tool that we're using is pretty cool.
All right. So the property came from sales, came to account managers. We talked about client relations. Can we touch briefly upon operations too? And what I have in my mind with that is, you want to communicate to the crew, this is where you park your truck. This is how you go servicing the site. So you see all these polygons on the map, right? Imagine telling your crew, oh, you were supposed to service this section of the property first, then this, north of the building first, then south, and sort of give them a direction of operating on site from start to finish for all these different services like mowing, pruning, edging. You give them something like a least cost path of servicing the site, right? And it's revolutionary in my mind, but obviously you guys have had feedback on it. And so this is a good example of where things are going and what we sort of need to do is to bridge that gap.
Yeah, and I would say for us, even Yellowstone, with as large as we are, motion mapping is not something that we do on a regular basis. Some of you in the audience may be better at us at doing that. You go and you do a takeoff, you say this is a 60-inch area, this is a 48-inch area, this is a 21-inch area, and it spits out your production rate, and that production rate goes to a costing and estimating system that spits out a price, and then we hand that to the crew and say, hey, you got 6 hours to do this job, good luck, right? And you have to excuse me, I'm an old football player, so to say, hey guys, go score a touchdown. And it's like, well, what play do you want to run? It's like, I don't know, just go figure it out. And that's kind of what we do with a lot of our crews. It's like, just go figure it out. We hired you to do that job, just go do it. Well, they hire quarterbacks in the NFL to play football too, but they give them a plan. So I think if we give a play to people to say, hey, here's how you're successful, here's how you're going to work through the program, and here's how you're going to meet our hours that we estimate on this project, then we'll be a better set at holding them accountable to meeting that expectation. We've done that some on our side, on Gantt charting and motion mapping. It's a lot of work, and so having a tool that lets you do that easier would make that a whole lot easier for all of us. And then the next step is being able to hold them accountable to the plan. Which is a whole separate ballgame. But I do think that we as an industry should be better at giving you guys a production plan to let them know what success looks like, instead of just giving them a set of hours and saying, go do it, right? And that's what a majority of us do.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Sorry, hang on. Do you guys see arrows on the map? Are you able to see the arrows on the map? I just noticed they're not too prominent. Do you see it? Yeah, do you see like these black arrows over the polygons? Are these green polygons? I'm colorblind. Okay, cool. So black arrows on green polygons. Okay, cool. Sorry, Danny, you were saying something.
It wasn't important. No, I would agree 100% with Ben. I think in my experience, efficiency doesn't happen like in the field once you give those guys this number of hours, right? That's not a plan. That's like
it's a target.
It's a hope.
Okay.
Right? But efficiency starts with managers building out plans and then handing plans over. And there's a much greater chance a crew is going to hit, an efficiency target if there's a good plan in place. And then, because a lot of times too, it's super easy to hit an hours target. You just cut corners, right? Especially in the field. So if I'm the supervisor and you're giving me that opportunity to beat an hours, I'm going to beat it, and the simplest way to beat it is just not doing all of the work, cutting corners, safety issues, quality, or whatever. But if you give me a plan that takes into account quality and safety, and then say, hey, I just need you to hit these hours, here's the plan, you can do that, then there's a great chance I'll hit the efficiency with quality and safety in mind.
Yeah.
But I just think that decision has to be made before going into the field, and that's a very tough thing to do. We've done that. We've tried to do time and motion maps and plan those out, and you try to use PowerPoint or something like that, and it just gets a lot of energy and efforts put into place, but never is used, right. Because it doesn't translate to the field very well. And I really think as we develop out layers of maps, this is this really new opportunity for us to be able to do that planning, have it live in a place that it can be accessed anywhere by anyone on your team, that it is usable to actually create efficiency, quality and safety, versus the idea of efficiency, quality, and safety.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I like how you put it, Ben. We don't really give clear instructions, and then we jump immediately to motion maps. Like, let's make sure they're going to the right places, though. And almost every time you hear it, it's like you have no idea how much time you're going to save because of all the bad, the stuff they're not supposed to do that they do. And it's like, well, there's a lot between those 2 points, right? Like leading people, right? And I think that, to your point, Daniel, there's a lot of friction in our business where there's a lot of time, effort, and energy goes into estimating a property. It's almost like that gets put into a box somewhere, and then a separate group of people with separate tools historically then try to figure out how to do the work and then kind of look back at the number that information, that work produced, which is a really strange way to do it, right? As opposed to, there's a progression, right, when you're taking off a property to think about at some level, at most levels, how the work's going to be done, what problems are there potentially. And for that to more seamlessly transition into an operational plan, it has to involve a map. And like that's what this has enabled us to do is like, as obvious as the question seems, like this is the map, right? This is how you print it, right? Like there's no, you don't have to worry about screen grabs and whatever, right? Like it is that intuitive and the learning curve's that short. And that's been a really big deal for us, just to be able to put people in a position to actually give operational direction.
So those production hours, when you put a path to it, and then you can be like, all right, Tech 1 spends 30 minutes with 21-inch more, then he goes into blowing. Tech 2 is going into edging. And so breaking that out into these blocks of jobs that people can associate with and figure out, okay, this is how I'll be spending my time, this is how I'll be moving around the property doing it, and this is how all of it comes together. So I'm rather at the end of the questions that I had to ask you guys about it. I want to open the floor and see what you guys think about what we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I apologize if I missed this, but how much time does it, can you give us an example like that map right there? What is that area, what's the size of that area, and how long does it take you to map it?
So there are two types of maps in there. One is the takeoff map. That was like a 50-acre property in California.
Can you go back to that one, the takeoff map?
The takeoff map? Yeah. This one? All right, so you want to get the takeoffs. A property like this, you will get this back in a few hours, like 5 hours, 6 hours. So you place the order on the system. It goes through a process of asking you, like, how long, what's the boundary of the property? What are the data points you're looking for here? You place the order, you get the data back. Like, you don't have to do any of the clicks here. It just comes back as you see it on the screen here. You might have to. It's unlikely you would have to though, and like.
Yeah, for us, just
they can speak to
share less than 10%, probably closer to 5%. But there was the initial fight from our long-term account executives, our business developers, to say like this isn't accurate. It's more accurate than the humans.
It's way
on a
more
property
accurate.
this size.
Yeah.
It is way more accurate.
I can say from a lot of the people at our place that when they use these things, they will do that. They'll go to the site because they want to be, again, they want to be special, they want to be relevant. They'll show up to the site and be like, well, this part's wrong because that was under a tree and you didn't measure that exactly right. And that, again, that may change the outcome of the bid 0.5% over time. But the theory is, in scale especially, if we're sending them 16 properties and they're sending us 16 properties back measured in a few days versus us going and doing it manually, like I'm going to accept that 0.5% error, right? It doesn't matter that much to me. But we do like, if we give a lot of this effort over to the salespeople or people that are producing the bids, and say, hey, now you can go and do a lot more site analysis because you don't have to do all this measuring, right? We find that to be beneficial too. So that's a good segue for people that don't trust it. Just go out there and test it. And one of the ways that we test it at Yellowstone is say, hey, here's properties that we already have. We already know what the production rate is. We know what the measurements are. We know it by heart because we've done it for years. Measure that, right? And we test it to see its accuracy. Then we say, hey, go out and measure stuff that we're bidding currently. And we're going to double do it. We're going to have people go out there and do it manually, and we have them do it too. And we compare those two for accuracy, right? So there's ways to test the theory. I can tell you we're doing it with a few different products right now, and they're all amazingly more accurate than you would expect them to be. And mostly because, remember, a lot of our people are doing it manually too. They're not exactly always accurate, right? My salespeople and operations people sometimes fight about how many hours it takes to do a job. I'm sure yours probably do too. Well, this is no different. It's another tool, but at least it levels the playing field a little bit to say, this is pretty mathematically finite. This is something that, square footage is square footage, right? Now, if you want to go out there and do production rates, that's different. But square footage is square footage. So let's all agree that at least the math is the math, and now we can argue about how quickly they can do it.
Question in front.
A very practical question, which may be irrelevant, but in the higher levels of the organization, everybody's using corporate data. If you want your field guys, your crew guys to be collecting images for you, are you getting any pushback because of the cost of data on their phones? A very practical consumption of their dollars. Is there any issue there whatsoever?
We haven't had that. We did switch to a lot of personal use policies at Yellowstone, so we had a lot of company-owned phones, and now we went to personal use phones. And we have not had that issue. If guys most of them have a pretty generous data plan, and they're not taking long videos in 4K and doing all this stuff. And if they do it, they can delete it off their phone if they want to right after they use it, or if it's a cloud-based software that takes the picture and puts it in the app but doesn't necessarily store it on the phone, that's a way for them to get around data usage limits too. But I'm sure we have some examples of that, but not on whole. We don't have a problem.
We own the phones.
Yeah, same.
Any other questions?
I think they're coming.
How are you? I'm from Central Idaho, and a lot of, like the last takeoff map you had a large vacant area north of where your takeoffs were. Right now in our area, it's being filled with Californians. How do you mitigate those areas that don't exist on the map, but still there's 30 properties right there that may need those services?
Honestly, sir, I didn't get the question. I'm sorry. How do you property that's been developed since the map shows it? Oh, good question.
Particularly by Californians moving
Yes.
into Idaho.
Yeah.
It's a plague.
Yeah, it's a problem. Yeah. They're gonna bring the weed with them. You should watch out. In any case, so there are 3 ways you can handle it. The first is the imagery updates every 3 to 4 months, right? That's the first way you handle it. Second, your guys going on site and putting eyes on it can take photographs and drop notes into our system that we then use to create the takeoffs, right? So there's like a 2-way flow. What you see on site, you can feed into the system, and then it iteratively improves the takeoff that it generated in the first pass. And the third way to do it is actually get a drone onto the site, fly it, send the imagery to us, and we'll do the takeoffs for you. Broadly speaking, technology does not let you do anything apart from those 3 things. So which one would be good for you would depend on if it's a large project, then obviously drone makes sense, right?
There's one other way would be the construction documents, and we do that a lot.
Yeah,
if it's new
PDFs.
development, we can almost always work with a developer, property manager to actually get the CDs, then we can take that off.
So you can take that PDF that you get from the contractor, upload it into the system when you place the order, and that gets used to create the maps.
Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
Yeah, Shane here from California. Plan on staying there. Yeah, so I was just thinking about, you talked about the team being able to access the maps and be able to see them. You said you guys have an app. How does a crew member like search for the property or locate that? Do they have access to everything? Or how is that organized for the team to be able to access it?
Very nice question. So helps me showcase the product finally. Thank you. So there are a couple of ways you can organize it. If you have multiple branches, you can have the properties organized according to workspaces. Second is you can have specific properties shared with specific email IDs that the crews will use to log into the system, and then they will see just those properties that have been shared with them. And then when they log into the mobile app, then they just see those properties. If there are like a lot of them, they can search for it. But like you can just scroll through it, open one of them, and see the takeoff, service areas, any notes that have been placed, the job plan, and so on. So they take it to the field, and they can see it. So the idea is, with all these different applications, there is something for everyone in your team to start using. So you can get the account managers to start with the notes piece. They do site audits. Do a site audit on the app, click a button, the report goes out to the customer right from the site. You've got a takeoff piece, very quick, rapid, a lot of layers that you would see on site, including slope of turf, height of trees, some 3D data points. You can get that remotely. Then there's the job planning piece. And a lot of operations managers may not have the bandwidth, the desire, the training to get started with it on their own. So we have our own program developed in partnership with Advisor Consulting to train the guys to start creating the maps. And then we scale that process once they have like created 20 maps out of a portfolio of 200 sites. We can create the rest 180 for you guys. And so you have all those with you in the database. And yeah, there's something for everyone. At some point, thinking about a mapping platform would help you consolidate all that data into one place. The institutional knowledge starts building, like Daniel was saying. And when you think about robotics and all these other things rolling out, all the sensor data that's going to get collected, you've got to centralize it in one place, right? You don't want to have that distributed. Those job plans that you were talking about was a big piece of robotic implementations, like, oh, this is what you do with robot. Once you get off the truck, this is how you move it from polygon to polygon. This is what the edging and the trimming guys are supposed to do after the mower does its job. So this thing actually fits into the future of everything that we have been talking of. It's the fundamental base on which we run our business is the property, right? It's the digital twin of that property. And yeah, come check in with us. We are open to chatting all the time. We are not like, oh, we're going to train you once and like, tata, bye-bye. We love to keep the conversation open. And there's like so much to connect and bond over here. A side note, this will probably roll out in the industry like a community. Even in your companies, this will come out like a community. There was an earthquake in Haiti a couple of years back, and the OpenStreetMap community just went in and mapped the whole country out in a matter of days. It was like a crowdsourced effort, right? And once the assets were on the OpenStreetMap, then the disaster response force could actually respond very intelligently to where they need to go. And so that's it, really. So once you start building that habit of getting data into the map, then it's available for anyone in your team to access it and make intelligent decisions based on that.
Yeah, real quick, Brian, if you don't mind. It's kind of going to sound like what I said in the robotic stuff, but Utkarsh, you've seen at this last couple of days some of these Indian companies that have come and invested in our industry. And one, these are super smart guys. Like I appreciate the fact that he's here. These are like MIT smart guys, so we need to remember that, and that's really exceptional for us to be able to participate in developing products like this with him. But put that QR code up real quick, if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
The only reason I say to do that is because I personally, probably like the rest of you, want to encourage more of this investment in our industry and more investment of smart people coming into our industry from robotics and from software and from hardware and other places. So, the only way we can encourage that more is to participate and use their products, or at least try them out. If you don't want to pay for it, don't pay for it, but at least give them a shot. And so as you go through the rest of these and you go back home, you compile your notes and look at it, please participate with these guys, the roboticists, the software guys, the guys that come across the world to come and show us products that they're developing for our industry. I think it's our job to give back and to hopefully make them successful.
Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.